Easy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order, and all desires to begin this meeting have come true, so congratulations, and 3 minutes early. So I hope the speakers will feel okay with that minor accommodation to Commissioner Mahaltas's afternoon schedule. Okay, thank you very much. David, are there any public speakers?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have 3 speakers this afternoon. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that, in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you when you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. Our first speaker is Lisa Daglian, who will be followed by Jason Anthony.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Dagley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. Short and sweet, Finance Committee. We'll be speaking more about this on Wednesday at the full board, but clearly it's about money, and we need it. So last week, members of the PCAC signed a letter to our local elected officials requesting to the local elected officials asking them to work collaboratively in Albany to pass a budget that fully funds the MTA. We shared their support, the ideas and the concepts that they support for filling the budget gap. Going into more detail on that, but I would be remiss to not just speak about funding the MTA fully every time we possibly can. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jason Anthony, who will be followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Hey, Neil. As Lisa said, we need to fund the MTA because our friends on the other side of the Hudson are acting very selfishly because Governor Murphy is not supporting congestion pricing, and he has said it publicly, and he admitted it publicly that he's not in favor of congestion pricing. We need to approve congestion pricing because our city is we should say, in a desperate congestion, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we can see it in our backyard, for example, the Coast Bronx Expressway, because yours truly was raised, for example, in the Bronx River houses. For example, I live in 455 Howard Avenue, and I can see through my window all the congestion coming to and from New Jersey, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I cannot see congestion anymore. This is why we need congestion pricing. And we need to tell Governor Murphy, support congestion pricing, or we won't let any New Jersey Transit train in the Sunnyside Yard. And it is what it is. Because, Kevin, we cannot let Phil Murphy to store any of his trains in Sunnyside Yard if we cannot approve congestion pricing. So I'll see you guys Wednesday morning.
Thank you. Our third speaker, speaking remotely, is Charlton D'Souza.
Good afternoon, everyone. Charlton D'Souza, President of Passengers United. So the Atlantic Terminal zone should be put in Zone 3, and all weekly Atlantic tickets, including the one-day Atlantic ticket, should be deeply priced because of the shuttle train service and the inconvenience that causes. So what I want to talk about is we went to Albany at Passengers United last month on February 15th. We were up there all day. We visited over 45 elected offices for the Assembly and the Senate. And I want to know something with the MTA. The MTA has basically refuted our program of calling for subway stations to have corporate sponsorship and for legislation to be introduced where a company could come in and adopt a subway station, pay for the maintenance, the cleaning of it, and contribute money. So in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, $5.4 million was raised by Wawa for this program. So the chairman has said that they cannot do this because of outdoor advertising and the contract that they have with them. I find that to be ridiculous. If you guys want money and we're going up to Albany to get money, that's what you guys should accept. Making poor people pay for Netflix and charging people, everyone right now, we're paying 5 different taxes for the MTA. So I don't understand why this is such a problem, guys. I have an issue with this. And that is in our legislative agenda at passengersunited.org. If you go there and you click under legislative, you'll see it there. So obviously that needs to be done. And this is why we're having issues with congestion pricing. I don't think it's fair to charge someone from 60th Street that type of money, guys. But we do support congestion pricing on the East River bridges. So thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that concludes the public speaking section of the meeting.
All right, thank you, David. I generally don't comment on public speakers' comments, but I would like to thank Jason because I'm going to use your phrase with my ENT this Friday, desperately congested. That is how it's been up in my sinuses, and I appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you. You were looking for humor earlier. You got it, Hada. Okay, let's move on to the minutes, please, for February's meeting. They're on page 5. You have a motion first.
So moved.
Second. All right, comments, questions, deletions, additions,
Andrew has a comment.
please.
There we are. On page 9, around the middle, it says, be similar to other counties such as Westminster, Nassau, and Sussex, instead of
we're in
Westchester,
London.
Nassau, and Suffolk. It's like it's London or something.
Yeah. Good catch, Andrew.
Nice, nice.
If they don't want to pay the PNC.
Doesn't London have congestion?
Oh, God, Hada, all right, here we go. Let's go. Okay, the work plan is on page 16 for 2023. I just want to check if there are any comments on that. Hearing none. Okay, budget watch, David.
Sure, thank you. These are results for operations for February and subsidies through March. They're measured against the adopted budget. Farebox revenue was $9 million favorable, or 2.9% in February, and over the first 2 months of the year was favorable by $11 million, or 1.6%. Farebox revenue reflects higher average fare than projected, as well as higher ridership. In February, ridership was favorable by $4 million, or 3%. Through February, ridership was favorable also by $3 million, or 1%. Farebox revenue through February, however, remains $268 million, or 29% less than the first 2 months of 2019, before the pandemic. Toll revenue was $8 million favorable, or 5.2% in February, and was $20 million, or 6% favorable year-to-date. Favorable toll revenue reflects higher than forecasted traffic, which was 4% above the projection both for the month and year-to-date. When adjusted to account for the 2021 toll increase, toll revenue was $40 million more, or 14%, above the level for the first 2 months of 2019. Expenses were $41 million, or 3% favorable in February. Year-to-date expenses were $82 million favorable, or 3%. Year-to-date, 69%, or $57 million, is attributable to favorable payroll and health and welfare costs due to vacancies, including the additional overtime necessary to cover those vacancies. About $16 million, or 20%, reflects lower electric power expenses due to prices and usage, mostly usage, and the remainder is predominantly timing-related. Overtime, which is included as part of the overall expenses, was $16 million unfavorable in February, or 21%, and was $19 million unfavorable year-to-date, or 12%. Overruns in New York City Transit, Metro North, B&T, and MTA headquarters for MTA Police Department were primarily due to vacancy and absentee coverage. Debt service was favorable by $16 million, or 16% in February, due to the timing of debt issuances and debt service deposits, as well as higher than budgeted variable rates. Year-to-date debt service was $15 million, or 3% favorable. Subsidies were $106 million unfavorable year-to-date through March, or 11%. March was $50 million, or 12% unfavorable, following February, which was $46 million, or 12% unfavorable. Through March, the payroll mobility tax is unfavorable by $9 million, or 2%, and the petroleum business tax is unfavorable by $16 million, or 10%. At this time, we believe these two unfavorable results are due to timing. Year-to-date, however, the real estate transaction taxes, MRT, and the urban tax attributed 69% of the overall unfavorable result. MRT was $61 million, or 39% unfavorable through March. The urban tax was $12 million, or 10% unfavorable through March. For the month of March, the real estate transaction taxes were $33 million, or 35% unfavorable. Last month, the real estate transaction taxes were $30 million, or 32% unfavorable. We continue to closely monitor receipts from these sources and will revise the mid-year forecast should it become necessary when we conclude that work. The mansion tax and the internet marketplace sales tax are deposited in the capital lockbox, and together they were $6 million, or 4% favorable through March. Taken together, the operating results through February and the operating budget subsidies through March, these results are favorable by $23 million against the budget, or 3%. And that concludes Budget Watch.
Okay, questions for David on Budget Watch? Okay, yeah, it's a couple quick things. One, I would say on the credit side, one on the debit side, just to use the vernacular. So on I guess it's page 2 of, is it page 2? Page 3, excuse me, of the Budget Watch. I appreciate you putting in the fare box revenue, and you're plotting it against the McKinsey mid, high, and low range. And it looks appears we're tracking with the high end of the range, which is good news. And, please.
Yeah, that is true. On a revenue basis, we're at the high end, but the majority of that is because we're getting a higher average ticket price, which we've talked about, which we've built into the budget. So we're happy with ridership. I think it's about, without that adjustment, about 1% above the McKinsey. So revenues are doing well.
McKinsey.
Midpoint. Right, so ridership is just a little bit above the midpoint, or happy with that it's above, but on a ridership basis, we're not at their high case because it's the average fare is giving us more revenue.
Okay, well,
Just to
that.
clarify.
I think it would be helpful then to include, maybe do a side by side with the fare box revenue and the actual ridership of this matter. On the debit side, I think it'd be useful, David, if you can do this from memory for the board's benefit. Can you remind everyone, since you went through the taxes relatively quickly, can you remind the real estate dependent taxes to this group? Because I think our memories fade in and out of meetings on the complexity of them. If you wouldn't mind reminding everyone, and what the driver is, if you wouldn't mind.
So there are two real estate transaction taxes. These are transactions, not property taxes. There's a mortgage recording tax, and there's what we call the urban tax. The urban tax is only collected in New York City on commercial properties over $500,000. It is a mortgage recording tax on those properties, and it's also a real property transfer tax on those properties. The mortgage recording tax, what we call the mortgage recording tax, are actually two mortgage recording taxes. One is on all properties within the 12 counties, including New York City, in addition to that urban tax MRT. And the other one is only on residential properties for structures that have 6 or fewer individual residential units.
And of our total taxes that are dedicated to us, what percentage that are roughly are real estate dependent taxes? Sorry to put a
It's
math
okay.
on this
I
test.
don't have that math in front of me, but it would be
Well,
probably about 20%.
Okay.
yeah, I'd say in terms of the real estate taxes that we get into the operating budget, it's I think close to $1 billion. And then we get the lockbox revenue, the mansion tax, which is about 300 to 400 million.
Yeah, so that 20% does not include the lockbox.
Okay, so let me ask my last question then, which is, how are we thinking about what's happening in the real estate market? Because we're obviously quite dependent on what's happening there. Do we have a viewpoint? Is it improving? Is it deteriorating? And how do we feel about that?
That's the reason why I mentioned last month in this report, the month of March is almost identical to the month of February. When you look at the variances, since the real estate taxes are very difficult to forecast, we actually use the exact same amount every month. So what we see now in March is what pretty much happened in February also.
All right, thank you. And Mr. CFO, would you like to say some comments, please, on the budget?
Yeah, a few general comments. We're definitely worried about the real estate related taxes. The mortgage recording tax, again, is also driven by a lot of refinancing activity that normally takes place. So when interest rates go up, people don't refinance their mortgages, less mortgage recording tax revenue. So When you kind of look where we are year to date, it's the positives and negatives balanced out a little bit. On the positive side, we've kept our expenses down, which is good. Ridership and then fare revenue with the average ticket price, very positive. We are starting to see some cracks open up in some of the real estate-based taxes that flow in. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But that's definitely a risk. As everyone's been watching interest rates gyrating all over the place. So we'll see. So again, a mix of positives and negatives on a year-to-date basis that ended up a little bit net positive, so that's good. We also did an analysis of how we closed out year-end 2022, and that's included in your book. But just at a high level, on a cash basis, we see ourselves ending up about 187 million better than projected, but net of timing, only 18 million better. So a little bit better, but when you get to year end, you have a lot of accrued expenses that the invoices haven't been paid. So you got to be very careful, comparing the accrued to the cash. And so when we kind of did a full, kind of deep dive of, what do we have to set aside in labor reserve for accrued expenses that hadn't been paid out, our general reserve that we budgeted and so forth. If you remember kind of big picture, we had projected in November that we would use up about 776 million of the federal COVID aid to close the gap in 2022. We ended up using 589, but most of the remainder of that money we expect to use, is mainly timing savings. So bottom line, the year end closed out, pretty close. It's all subject to kind of final audit and review and so forth. But from my perspective, no surprises there.
Okay. Marcia, want to give us the, is Marcia here? Marcia, sorry. Oh, she's on video. Sorry, Marcia. No, not right now.
Can you hear me? Am I off?
Yes, you're good. Good, thank you.
Terrific.
Sorry for not oh, we just lost her.
Am I still here?
There you are.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, good afternoon. And Finance Watch is on page 22. We just have 2 items. On March 14th, we closed the 1.25 billion sales tax revenue bonds. This is the capital lockbox sales tax from the city side transaction. And the proceeds are used for transit and commuter projects in the 2020 to 2024 capital program, as well as there'll be a portion of the capital cost of the Central Business District tolling program when that's up and running with the infrastructure. Just a couple notes about that, given the volatility that Kevin just mentioned. The week of pricing happened to be a little bit stable, and we priced the institutional pricing the day before the news of Silicon Valley Bank and then Signature Bank broke. So we were ahead of the new volatility that then hit the market. We did have strong interest, about 3.3 billion in orders and 113 separate institutional investors, which was a large turnout for us. And we had some insurance companies that like the longer years, and the final maturity is 2063. So we thank BofA Securities and our whole syndicate team for a job well done on that. And then on February 28th, we executed a fuel hedge for approximately 2.8 million gallons on the ultra low sulfur diesel, priced at $2.57. And that's Finance Watch.
Okay, cool. Any questions? Please.
Thank you, Marcia. Just a quick question on the internet sales tax lockbox. I believe you've done 2 issuances against the city sales tax. I'm not sure if 2 is right, but
That's correct.
So I also see the receipt of the state's portion as well. So when you do these issuances, just curious, as to you're doing it against the city internet sales tax, but you
Right.
also have the receipts from the state. So just curious about what that structure entails.
When we launched the credit last July, one of the reasons we launched the credit solely on the city sales tax is that it comes to MTA without appropriation, and currently the state sales tax comes with appropriation. So it was a stronger credit not to have that appropriation aspect to it. So right now the credit is solely on the city sales tax portion, and the state sales tax that you see come in is just going into the lockbox and currently access PAYGO.
And so just the timing of the appropriation. So what you're saying is that irrespective of whether there is an appropriation on the state side, that because of the timing and the nature of those deposits, that you'll treat that as PAYGO, in perpetuity, or?
We've considered adding that into a credit as well. It's being considered, but it's currently not something that we have, in the immediate future. I'll defer to Kevin if he's making a comment. I can't hear what he's saying.
He is holding off.
He's just smiling at the moment.
I'm complimenting Sharif on his question. Marcia was right. The city sales tax is not subject to appropriation. That's why it was kind of the first easily bondable stream. Doesn't mean we won't bond the state portion at some time. The other thing that we will look at with congestion pricing is to whether we start to combine some of the revenue streams for debt as congestion pricing is ramping up. We have the state portion, which is very stable and kind of locked in, subject to appropriation. We have the mansion tax, which is kind of subject to the real estate market. And then we'll have the congestion surcharge, which are all three bondable. But the congestion surcharge, you need to get a track record before you can bond it. So my point being that some time down the future, we may look to create a credit that combines the revenue stream and issues the amount of debt we need to issue to hit the full $25 billion from the lockbox, which comes from the combination of congestion pricing, the mansion tax, the city portion, and the state portion.
Thank you for that explanation. The second piece, just on the congestion pricing, I guess, piece of this issuance, the proceeds for that are the startup costs associated with some of the?
No, this particular issuance will go to fund 20 to 24 capital program items, not in the startup. The startup costs will eventually be paid from the congestion pricing bonds. We did a bond anticipation note to advance some of the costs, and that'll get taken out, but neither the city, state, or mansion tax would be used to pay the startup
Right, I
costs.
was just referring to the ban that you actually have.
Correct.
For now, this
Yeah.
is sort of the initial startup cost.
Yeah.
Okay, got it, thank you.
All right, any other questions from Finance Watch? All right, thank you, Marcy. I did ask Kevin, I did think it'd be useful, given what's been happening since last board meeting with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature and First Republic, just to talk briefly about its impact or lack of impact on us. Kevin, the floor.
Sure, thanks, Neil. Obviously when there's these kind of very sudden bank issues and bank failures, the first thing you realize is that the damage could be widespread among a lot of institutions. So the first thing, the good news is MTA has no direct exposure to any of the banks we're talking about. So just when you think about our daily cash management and holding of securities, Boney is our custodian for holding our treasuries, which is primarily almost 100% of our investments. Chase holds our operating accounts, so payroll and things like that go through Chase. On the bond side, our trustees again are Boney and Wells Fargo. So the good news in terms of all of our cash management, it's all with the really significant, systematically important banks, whereas, the concern is more at the regional bank level that didn't have the same kind of regulatory scrutiny. The other exposure that we have is we do have, we have a big variable rate portfolio that are secured by bank letters of credit. So investors buy this floating rate debt, and the credit is enhanced because on 7 days' notice, they can put the security, and the bank letter of credit supports that. So the question is, what kind of bank letters of credit do you have behind it? And again, the other good news is we have about $2.2 billion of floating rate debt secured by bank letters of credit, and all of them are with of the $2.2 billion. About $1.6 billion is with top systematically important banks. J.P. Morgan, Barclays, State Street, Bank of America. About $600 million is with still large banks, but just slightly below that top tier, PNC Bank, Bank of Montreal, and U.S. Bank. And none of those banks have shown any, there's nothing that has come up. But something we're going to watch, because if, what we found during the financial crisis, when investors, if they become uncomfortable with the banking system as a whole, they don't differentiate between good banks and bad banks. They, tender everything and move into treasuries and so forth. So it's an exposure we're watching. I'm not, particularly concerned right at the moment, but, we have, always have to think of contingencies if there is disruption in any of these markets. In terms of, then the third exposure is on our pension fund. Just, as all pension funds, you have private equity investments, and, some of these private equity managers, when they're, in between, they've collected capital from the participants and they've deployed them out to companies, they get held in the banks. And, some of the, a few of our managers apparently did have money at Silicon Valley Bank. They all got redeemed out. I don't think it was a big dollar exposure. It's really hard to get reporting on it, but right now we don't see anything standing out there either. David.
Unrelated, we just were talking about our exposure in the real estate market. Is it potential with these bank failures that there's going to be an impact on lending that goes on, and therefore diminishing some of the returns that we need?
Well, clearly, the big debate going on is, the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates, trying to tighten financial conditions to slow down the economy and slow down inflation. And so when there's a banking crisis, you're exactly right, the immediate thing is, less lending as the banks, figure out, do they need to shore up their balance sheet? So if there's less lending, and that leads to, probably to fewer transactions, maybe less in the residential mortgage market, but more in the big commercial mortgage market, which drives our urban tax, we could have some exposure to fewer real estate transactions in the region will lead to less revenue for us.
Okay, thanks for that, Kevin. Appreciate keeping attention to that and keeping us informed. Okay, action items, David, a couple.
Sure. There are two action items. The first item seeks board approval to file for and accept federal grants for federal fiscal year 2023 against federal fiscal year 2024 appropriations. Materials can be found on page 32 of the committee book, and staff are available to answer any questions.
In what world would we not approve that? Can I have a motion, please? Motion. Thank you. Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. David.
The second item is the 2022 annual procurement report, and we're seeking approval to file this report. This report with the State of New York as required under Section 2879 of the Public Authorities Law. Materials can be found on page 39 of the committee book, and staff are available to answer any questions.
David, any highlights you want to mark for the board from that report?
I would turn that over to Lou Montanti.
Lou?
Thank you. Nothing specific. It's a compilation of all of the contracts that were awarded in 2022 that gets added to prior awards, so it's a very large database, as well as expenditures, actual payments made through 2022 as well.
Thank you, Lou. Did anyone have any questions on that voluminous document? No? Then I can have a motion then to submit it, please. Thank you, Blanca. Second. Second. Discussion. Anything? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes. Lou, procurement.
Yes, thank you again. There's one action for MTA headquarters for Finance Committee approval in the amount of $34.3 million. The action on page 49 of the committee book seeks approval of a modification to extend the miscellaneous service contract with Masabi LLC to continue administering the mobile ticketing program for Long Island Railroad and Metro North for an additional 3 years to coincide with the anticipated 2025 substantial completion date of Omni, at which time the Omni system will take over the provision of this program to our customers. For this extension, Masabi initially proposed a 1.4% per ticket value for the first 2 years and a 1.7% fee for the third year. Through negotiations, we were able to reduce that to 1.25% per ticket value for the first 2 years and 1.5% for the third year. The estimated total amount is, as I indicated, $34.3 million, and this extension will allow for the uninterrupted mobile passenger ticketing process during the Omni implementation period. Special note, the independent engineering consultant item that was originally listed has been deferred to the April board.
Okay, let's just go back to what you said about the Masabi. I just want to confuse it with what you said at the end. So we have Masabi in front of us. Folks, can I have a motion, please? Or a second. All right, discussion about this action item or this procurement? Any? Okay, so Lou, just remind us, so this is going to be taken through till sunsetting of this system when Omni then takes over for the rails?
Yes, and if it's any earlier, we have no obligation to continue with Masabi.
Okay, very good. Sir? Okay. Any other questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. David, we skipped over prompt payments, we being myself and my zeal to move forward with speed and pace, so I apologize. So please, sir.
Sure. There's one information item. It's the 2022 prompt payment annual report. It can be found on page 40 of the committee book, and staff are available to answer any questions. There's no action on that item. It's just information.
Okay, well, does anyone have any question on payments being made promptly? Okay, thank you very much, sir. All right, Lou, the agency it is important to be paid promptly, to pay, right, pay your debts and to be paid. Okay, very good. Lou, agency procurements, please.
Yes, there's, for Metro North and Long Island Railroad, there's one information item on page 51 of the committee book for Long Island Railroad. It was approved earlier today at their committee. It's award of a 24-month contract to Railware for the purchase and installation of a traffic control system software to replace the existing software system at the Jamaica Control Center that is beyond its useful life. There are no information items for Metro North. Okay, for New York City Transit and MTA bus operations, there is one joint information item on page 53 of the committee book for New York City Transit and MTA bus, which was approved by the committee earlier today, requesting that the board declare competitive bidding impractical or inappropriate for the procurement of 4 bus operator simulators, and it is in the best interest of the public to issue a competitive request for proposals. For bridges and tunnels, there are no information items for bridges and tunnels this month. And finally, for First Mutual Transportation Assurance, there are no information items either.
So just for everyone's reminder, we do this on a monthly basis, even though it's been voted on by other committees, because obviously there's transactions that cost money. They're being brought to us for if you will, a check. So if you have any questions or thoughts, we don't have to vote on it, but it's here for us to acknowledge. So just so you understand the perceived repetitive nature of that. Any questions on any of those information items? Okay, so we've got our consolidated financial and operational reports in the committee book on page 55. And included is that the 2022 year-end statement of operations that Kevin was referring to earlier. The gang's here for any questions you may have. If you do, this is the moment to raise them. If not, we'll move on to real estate items. Hearing none, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Real estate has 9 action items for consideration and approval. The first is for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. It is the annual all-agency real property disposition guidelines and all-agency personal property disposition guidelines required by the Public Authorities Law. This is a submission every March of our disposition guidelines, and it's in director's desk with red lines indicating procedural and personnel changes. The second, third, and fourth items for MTA New York City Transit. The first is the lease with M&H Ices of Coney Island for retail space at the Stillwell Avenue Terminal Complex in Brooklyn. The second is a resubmission of the lease with the City and University of Newark for the temporary parking relocation of New York City Transit buses in Jamaica, Queens. We had inaccurately portrayed the value of the lease in January, and the corrected number is in the staff summary. The last transit item is an amendment to the license with Swift vending operations for vending machines at various subway stations. The fifth item is for MTA Long Island Railroad. It is an amendment of lease for the Village of Greenport for an expanded vehicle queuing area in connection with ferry operations in Greenport. The sixth and seventh items are for MTA Metro North Railroad and include a lease renewal with NYIP Owner 2 LLC for warehouse space at 101 Executive Boulevard in Elmsford. And the seventh item is an eminent domain resolution to acquire property interest in support of the Brewster Yard improvements in the southeast. The last 2 items, 8th and 9th, are for MTA Bridges and Tunnels. They include a license with Knowles Crescent for installation of subsurface anchors in support of the Henry Hudson Bridge Capac Street Wall Project in the Bronx. And the last item is a license with the New York City Fire Department for the maintenance and operation of a fiber optic cable across the Whitestone Bridge. There is, in addition, one information item. Happy to answer any questions regarding the foregoing.
What is the information item?
It is a license agreement with Veselka, which is a new dining concourse use that we were able to do. And we hope it's a Ukrainian concept. They're currently in East Village, very popular. So we're able to secure 3-year license with them in the dining concourse, and we hope that they'll be open by June.
All right, let me have a motion first for the real estate items as a group. Motion? Second? Second? Anyone? Okay, thank you. Any questions on any of the items listed? All right, I have one, David. Look, I appreciate you stating to us that the resubmission of the lease, your second item, was because of an error. Can you just, it may be worth just further prostrating yourselves over what happened, because it's worthy of just note, and I thank you for being so direct about that.
The annual rent was based on November 2021 appraisal at $1 million. What was missing in our submission in January is that we had already agreed, given the passage of time, to escalate the rent by 1 year, 3%. We had agreed with CUNY on this already. That did not make it into the January staff summary.
Great, thank you for saying that. Hearing no questions, then I'll ask for, please, Blanca.
I apologize. Just a quick question on the information items. The location with Veselka, it just says dining concourse, food and beverage.
It's the southwest corner. Right now we have, we're diagonally across.
The Grand Central?
Grand Central Terminal.
Oh, okay.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, Grand
That's what I
Central
meant.
Dining
Thank you very
Concourse.
much.
Right, okay.
Thank you, Blanca. I thought this, I assumed that, but that was okay. Hearing any other questions? All in favor, say,
Sorry. It's a different item.
Elizabeth,
Sure.
please.
Sorry, and I apologize for not being in person today, personal issues. But on page 45 of the board book, there was a board resolution. I'm not sure if we took action on that board resolution. Page 45 of
I'm just pulling
136,
up- I'm
Finance
just,
Committee.
My UNIVAC went into sleep mode, so I'm just pulling it up.
Okay.
Hold on, was it page 45? Page 45? I think we took it, I think we did this, yeah. Yeah, I think we did it.
We did take action? I'm just asking, I did not see the Schedule A, so I apologize. The Schedule B, Schedule C, or the Schedule D, or the Schedule E, unless it's in this board book.
Okay, yeah, page 40. So page 40, you're talking about the board resolution. So maybe, can you just describe that? I think Sharif said it correctly. We have these boilerplate, what needs a vote and what doesn't, and what kind of vote. Maybe it's worthy just explaining it for everyone, because it does, those are used, and they are used often without reference to which resolution it goes to. Whichever one of you guys wanted to explain it, thank you.
I believe we're talking about, there were two procurements originally listed. We're only seeking approval for one, which was for Masabi.
I think but I think what Elizabeth's asking is the page that starts with "whereas in accordance with section 1265-A, blah blah blah." She's asking what is that document tied to? I believe she's saying that page of, if you will, to Sharif's point, boilerplate language is tied to what is what she's asking.
It's tied to a series of public authorities, Law 1209, 1265. Paige, do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
The potato is hot and passed.
Unfortunately, I can't because I don't have it in front of
Yeah.
me, but okay.
It is a standard document with a set of resolutions.
Mr. Chair, I think this goes on the second page
Yeah.
of the summary, which is the page before, that we put into every Finance Committee book before the specifics that you're voting on.
Exactly, and I think Elizabeth's asking which is it tied to? Which of the procurements is that?
What I'm looking at, it's tied to the all-agency general contract procurement guidelines, and I believe this was voted on in governance.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth, does that clarify it? Not really.
I guess it's not tied to anything specifically. That's what I was asking, because it talks about non-competitive contract procurements. So I know I think we did a non-competitive contract procurement with bus training, simulators. I didn't see more, but I'll go with it. I just wanted to make sure that if we covered everything today.
The bus simulator was an approval from the committee and board to be able to utilize a request for proposal as opposed to a bid. So it wasn't quite an approval of an actual procurement item, it was approval of a procurement process.
As a non-competitive item.
Non-competitive from the standpoint in that it will be an RFP as opposed to a competitive bid. So we will use an RFP process that will garner competition, but not through, the normal award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder.
Okay. Thank you.
But just to clarify, what Commissioner Velez is looking at, this board resolution does pertain to the all-agency general contract procurement guidelines that was presented at governance. Somehow it made it to the Finance Committee book. The schedules that is below the whereas are standard schedules for the procurement, for those procurements, not any specific procurement. And I know Lou was just talking about bus procurements, but these schedules that's listed in this board resolution doesn't pertain directly to bus procurements, but these are schedules that are used in the contract procurements, the general contract procurements. I hope that
Thank you,
clarifies
Paige.
things.
Did we vote on it today in finance, or was this just accidentally included?
This was presented in governance, and it may have been accidentally included in finance.
Thank you.
Sharif, would you like to further clarify?
Not sure I can provide the clarification, but I think we've seen these resolutions obviously precede many, many, many procurements, and I think if I can channel what I think Elizabeth is saying, it would be helpful at the next meeting, next committee meeting, to sort of detail the public authorities law says this on procurements. We've interpreted that to mean this. These resolutions by statute, by rule, by guidelines, have to proceed these procurements for these reasons, so that the board has a fuller understanding of the procurement process.
Yeah, I think Lou or you or Kavesh, I think it would be good for us to have maybe a reminder, refresh of our procurement guides, because some things we have for non-competitive, some things are competitive, some things are competitive with a larger vote than others. And I think we have not had a refresher as a board about, or committee is that. I think that's a really good idea. So if we wouldn't mind programming in for our next meeting, some little training, if you will, on that, or at least a reminder. Thank you for that, Sharif and Elizabeth. Okay, we still have a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second on the floor for the real estate items. I'm going to call the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. Thank you very much. I think that's about it. Any new business for the committee? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Second, thank you very much. We'll see you on Wednesday for the full board meeting.
Thank you, everyone.